Welcome, everyone, as you're all logging on. We will start our program in 3 minutes. Thanks for joining us. Welcome, everyone. So glad you're here with us today. We have fabulous attendance for this wonderful program. I'm Judith Shankman. I am the Midwest Regional Director of American Friends of Hebrew University. Just a little bit about us for those of you that don't know that much about us. AFHU connects the passions of Americans to the talents of the Hebrew University, one of the world's most distinguished academic and research institutions. In addition to raising awareness and funds for the university, American Friends of Hebrew University helps the university recruit and retain outstanding faculty, build teaching and research facilities, provide scholarships and fellowships. Our support helps the university advance human understanding in a myriad of fields, including agriculture, astronomy, history, archaeology, energy, psychology, medicine, and much, much more. During these challenging days, there are many ways that you can get involved with us, from participating in future webinars, learning about groundbreaking research currently going on at the university, to supporting researcher scholarships at the Hebrew University. Please visit afhu.org regularly for information about our programs and webinars. AFHU is offering a whole series of webinars on a variety of topics as we are all sheltering in place and looking for enriching and informative programs for both our intellect and our souls. Today, we're looking forward to an illuminating presentation. We'll leave questions and answers for the end. So to submit a question, please type the question in the box at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best at the end of the presentation to answer as many as possible. And now I have the privilege of introducing Dan Schlesinger, the chairman of the Board of Governors of Hebrew University, who is here with us today. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Judith, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for coming to what promises to be a very informative and fascinating discussion. As Judith mentioned, I'm the chairman of the Board of Governors of Hebrew University. I'm also an alumnus of the university, and I actually spent an interesting year there that in some ways compares to this challenging year, in the sense that I was there in 1973-74, when classes were canceled and we did not have the technological capability of doing what the university is doing now. I just want to take a minute to say how proud I am of the way that the university has risen to the occasion, to the challenge of what's going on around the world and in Israel. For those of you who are not aware, remote learning is going on very successfully. The university is sponsoring and has taking place right now amazing research, not only the regular research that it does on a regular basis, but a lot of specifically COVID-directed research that's already yielding results that you will be hearing about in the coming months. So it's wonderful to be associated with this institution that takes such a strong leadership role in Israel and the world. I'd like to now introduce our speakers for our program on Jewish life in Germany then and now. Our Hebrew University guests will be discussing how the Holocaust experience colors our world, the past through German Jewish life, and the present through the experience of Israeli scientists in Germany. Hebrew University professor Ofer Ashkenazi is an associate professor of history and the director of the Kobner Minerva Center for German Study at the Hebrew University. He received his PhD from Hebrew University in 2006 and did postdoctoral research at the University of California, Berkeley, and also taught at the University of Minnesota. His research interests include Central European cultural and intellectual history, modern visual culture, and the Jewish experience in 20th century Europe. And he will share a historical perspective of Jewish life in Germany in the 20th century. Our other speaker is Professor Gad Yair, and he is a professor of sociology, currently on sabbatical at the MIT Sloan School of Business as an Israel Institute visiting professor. He regularly serves in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at the Hebrew University. Professor Yair has published 7 books and about 90 papers, many of which revolve around Israeli culture, education, and academic life. He served in various administrative roles, including chair of his department, deputy dean, and head of a research institute. Professor Yair will share a sociological look at Israeli scientists who are living and working in Germany today. And now, let's turn the program over to our speakers. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Dan, and hi, everyone. I will be speaking. Dan said that we will speak on topics that are related to the Holocaust, but my topic here is focused on the years before the Holocaust, years that are mostly characterized by uncertainty, the sense of pressure, the sense of not knowing where things are going, sense of crisis, which is not similar to what we feel today, but there are some elements that maybe you will see as parallel to what we experience, especially when maybe in a few weeks ago, a few months ago, when we didn't know exactly where we're heading and what is going on. I am a historian of modern Germany and modern German Jewish experience in Germany, and I'm interested mostly on the ways Jews during these years before the Holocaust, before World War II, between 1933 and 1939, the way they did comprehend what's going on in Germany, trying to explain to themselves and to the people around them what is going on, where are we heading, and try to control the way their experiences will be remembered. This is the reason why I'm looking at photography, mostly amateur photography, photographs that were taken by family member, documenting family routines, the house, the environment, and so forth. Now, why would I think that looking at photography is a good source to understand how people think of what's going on? I would like to explain it today, and I would say that we have a limited time, and I'll keep it short, between 15 and 20 minutes. So I will not talk about all the aspect of Jewish life and documentation of Jewish life, but on pretty limited aspect around the question of belonging. How do we feel about belonging to the culture, to the society, that is trying to exclude us at the moment. So why photography? When we are talking about 1933, January 1933, when Hitler comes to power, is a time after a technological revolution and cultural revolution in terms of photography. Since the later 1920s, many families have a camera at home, maybe more than one camera, and everybody is taking photographs, at least everybody in the middle class, and among them, of course, many middle-class Jews. You see this in a picture too, Jewish teenagers, 1934, 35. Both of them have cameras, different kind of cameras. It's not just that people have cameras, they also know how to recognize a good photograph. They know the history of photography. There are lots of illustrated magazines, there are lots of manuals, how to take a good photograph. Like this one that you see here, it's called Otto's Photos. It's children manuals on how to take a good photograph. Even though the Nazis really wanted to control the way Germany is represented during the 1930s, they didn't really care about amateur photography, and Jewish people continued to take photographs throughout the 1930s, and sometimes even to the 1940s. They could, if they wanted to, they could develop their photographs at home. There were manuals. It was pretty easy to do to have a darkroom at home, but they could also go to photoshops and photograph and develop whatever they want, whenever they wanted, at least until 1939. This is a commercial from an advertisement from 1938 to a Jewish business of Photoshop. So it was prevalent everywhere. It's not like today when you have digital photography and you don't carry it. You can take the same photograph 10, 15 times like my daughters do. But it was cheap, but it wasn't free. So people would think of how many photographs they take and exactly what they want to capture. Usually film roll was 4 to 6 photos. So you need to think how you want to take these specific photos. All right, one more thing before I start to talk about the photographs themselves. The photographs do not have an objective meaning. What we ask ourselves as historians is, what is the meaning of the photograph for the person who took it, for the person who put it in the album? You see here a photograph from Hitler Youth Movement's parade in Bonn, that is taken from the side. It can have many meanings, but if you know that the photographer was this Jewish kid, Abraham Sif, we have to ask ourselves, what did it mean to him to take this photograph? Why he thought it was interesting, why he thought it was interesting to take it from a certain perspective and not other? Why would he keep this photo and not other photos that he took the same day? Why he put this one in the album and where in the album we put it and so forth. And then we kind of making back the story, the narrative that he wants to tell about himself. All right. The most important thing that I want to talk about today is the way people appropriated images, the way they used images they knew from other contexts and put it in their context in order to say something about the reality they captured, they document. Look at this photograph, for example. This is from a Hafshara camp, from a training Zionist camp for German Jewish youth from 1936. This is in Germany, near Berlin. And you can see this very conspicuous way that it was taken from below and diagonal angle and so forth. The photographer who took this photograph, and he was not an amateur, he was a professional photographer, took it in a way to imitate the way Zionists in Palestine at that time, in the land of Israel, were documented in the Zionist propaganda. But the Zionist propaganda itself was taking its cue from propaganda in other places, for example, in Germany at that time, right? And the Germans themselves never, the Nazis did not invent anything. They were copying, appropriating from the Soviet aesthetics of the time. So you have this shift, these circles of images that goes, and everybody puts it in their own context to say something about themselves. Now I get to my photographs. Look at this one, for example. This is a photograph of some Jewish kids in 1935 taking a walk, and it looks like a very straightforward photograph of them hiking and having fun in the fields, not so far from where they lived at that time. But then when you look at it carefully, you see that they tried to imitate a very famous image taken from another youth movement, the Wandervogel youth movement, a nationalist German youth movement that used to be very popular around World War I. Just pay attention to the guitar and the structure and the two columns of the walkers there. It's very obvious that what they're trying to do is to imitate the other photo, to say we are part of this culture. Don't leave us behind. At least it looks like that. I will show you later maybe a different way to look at it. Oh, look at this photo. We see this the Rosenthal family going on the Alps on vacation. It looks very straightforward, right? Now I want to show you the origin of this photograph. This is a postcard from the same area, which is kind of a cliche postcard of what the Germans would call Heimat scenery, Heimat, the homeland, which is associated with authenticity, with belonging, with being organic part of the land. And in these photographs, you always have the same cliche, the same iconography. For example, you have the church spire in the middle. You have the V shape of the mountains. This is on the Alps. That center on the church. You have the forest. You have the houses, farmhouses, usually one in the front and many others in the back. And you have the road that goes between the houses and connect them one with another. Now look at our image here of this Jewish family that goes. They basically reconstructed the same image with the same cliches. You have the church spire in the middle, you have the V shape of the mountains, you have the forest and the farmhouses. Even though they're not in the same place, it's very carefully taken so it will have all these elements. So what are they doing? And the roads, of course. What are they doing? They are placing themselves in this cliche of Heimat, of belonging, saying we are part of that. We are part of this culture. This is how we want to be remembered. This is 1937. This is very late in the history of German Jews under Nazism, and still this is the way they want to be remembered. This goes not only for outdoors, but also to indoors photography. Look at this photograph of the Stiefel family. It's a wedding in Duisburg in West Germany, 1938. Again, very late in the game. And look, they having their wedding reception at home because they can't do it elsewhere as Jews in 1938 Germany. And look at how they play with the same motifs. For example, we talked about the Heimat cliches. They have it here, again in the middle of the photograph, right above them, right above this Jewish couple on the wedding. They have this, but you need to know that Heimat and all these cliches around it it's not something that is specifically national German, it's more bourgeois German. It's to say we are part of the German bourgeoisie or the educated German bourgeoisie, and therefore you have other signs like the gladiola flowers here that are part of celebrations. You have the desk behind them, the armoire behind them. This is signs to say that we are part of the bourgeoisie, but also this photograph, you can see that they have also photographs of their family members, in this case their parents, the parents of probably the woman here, that say there is kind of a continuation, some deceased family members to make sure that they are in the picture of the wedding, they are part of it. And here again, also some Jewish elements like a prayer book that they have here. So when they take a photograph of their reception, of the wedding reception at home, the photograph they think or they feel should say many things about them just before their world is collapsing. We are part of German culture. We are part of the German bourgeoisie, socially speaking. We are part of the Jewish community, and we are part of a continuing presence in this culture. All that is in one photo that they chose to have and remember. This idea of Jewish and non-Jewish and bourgeois German elements repeats itself in many places. Here we see in the rabbi of Bochum, the city rabbi of Bochum, how he takes a portrait of him in this, you have all the symbols of the German bourgeoisie, but above him there is a portrait of himself, painting portrait of himself in his traditional Jewish clothing. Again, to say the way I want to remember this time is a combination of these two aspects in my identity. Take a look at this amazing photograph, which does not have anything Jewish in it, but the Jewish aspect is that the family member taking their last picture from this house because they have to evacuate, they have to leave, they are forced out. What do we have here? First of all, we have again this image, this painting with all the cliches that we talked about before. It's hard to see from this angle, but the point is that they want, even though you can't see much of it, they want you to see that they have that, and this is important part of their life. How do I know that? Look at how the picture is shaped, like a pyramid, or maybe an arrow that goes from the family members, these 3 generations of family members, and goes up to show this is the important stuff. But I want to show you something else here. This one. This is an insignia of the nobility. It has nothing to do with Germany or with middle class. This is about the local identity. This is a nobility of the Braunschweig area where they used to live. So you see here when we talk about layers of identity and layers of the way we want people to remember, or the way we want to remember it, we have the regional identity, the class identity, the national identity, and of course the Jewish identity, which is the reason for the whole photograph. I want to say something about albums. This is an album of the Dienemann family, and it was made basically for the daughter Lieselotte, or sometimes they call her Lilo. This is her life story, from her baby days to meeting with friends, going to the class, being in the classroom, and so on and so forth. You can see her on the left-hand side here sitting with her father. So it's very straightforward until we go to this page, which is the only page in the photograph, in the album, that has photographs that are not from the 1930s, not from under Nazism. And it shows her father, the one we saw before, now in World War I in the German army uniform. This is a way to say the story of Lilo, the story of this young Jewish girl, is part of a bigger story of German Jews and their contribution and their belonging in the German nation. And unsurprisingly, the last page of the album would have this, again, going back to the cliche of Heimat that I described before, this house Little House on the Prairie, and it goes with a poem. It's called Traute Heimat, the trusted Heimat, basically as a way to say we are part of this land. We are part of this landscape. We belong here. We are an organic part of it, and this is important because the album was made to Lilo when Lilo was not there. She was in Sweden. Went with a children transport and basically saved herself from Nazism just before World War II, the Second World War. Her parents sent her an album about her life, but in this album they say, remember who you are. Who you are is German middle class, part of the German nation, part of the German landscape. I have a couple of more minutes. I'll show you another couple of examples. This one is a nice one. It's a little different because it looks like it has nothing to do with what we talked about before. It's two Jewish women taking the day off on Sunday and just going to have fun at the pool, at the swimming pool. There's nothing here about Nazism. There's nothing here about identity. There's nothing here except for just normal people having fun. But look at the way this photograph is structured. Everything in the photograph says what I said before, except for one thing that is right here. And this is the swastika flag that overlooks everything. And this is different from what we saw before, but in a way it's the same idea of saying who we are, what we are. We are living in Germany. We can go on vacation. We can blend in, but then we always remember, we always see that thing in the upper side of the frame right here. And again, this is how they chose. This is not a snapshot. This is how they chose to take the photograph, and this is the photograph they chose to keep in their album. All right, I'm coming to an end. I'll go back to the first. If you remember, the first image we saw was from Northern It's an island on the North Sea, which used to be called in the Nazi time the Jewish island, because it was one of the places that still accepted Jews in. And you can see here this great group of young Jews having fun, but you can see how carefully they staged this photograph. This is not, again, this is not a snapshot. This is very well choreographed image to show how much fun we have. And when we look at it, we see that there is something that is a little off there, something that they're trying too much. And I think, just to end with this really nice allusion, this suitcase that doesn't belong there, or we could have thought of a photograph without it, but the suitcase is a symbol of going away, a symbol of leaving Germany. We don't know where we're going, and most of the people in the photographs, of course, in a couple of years later, would leave Germany, would not be there anymore. All right, I'll end with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ofer. You can go back to the opening screen. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Judith. And I'll take you to a very different story. Trains, shouts of Achtung, the German language, meeting with old German scientists, seeing doubles of Himmler and Eichmann roaming the streets in Berlin, seeing snow in Germany or road signs to Dachau, scientific conferences at Villa Vanzi, anecdotal jokes about Jews, Nazi objects in the living room of the research partners, or photographs of family members in SS uniforms, and a chronic feeling of a gap between the beauty of the scenic landscape in Germany and the memory of the horrors inflicted by the Nazis. Undoubtedly, the visit of Israeli scientists to Germany and their work with their colleagues there raises the shadow of Nazi Germany. This is how second-generation scientists report. This is how third and fourth generation scientists talk about their experience there. Even scientists whose families have not experienced the horrors of the Holocaust reported feeling distressed in Germany. In this sense, Israeli scientists are Israeli like everyone else. Like other Israelis, they too exhibit extreme sensitivity to sights and sounds in Germany. And like other Israelis, they too see through the slits of the present old Nazi Germany. Even when they are not looking for signs, they find them. Even as they seek to focus on their scientific work in Germany, the German past penetrates their consciousness and brings back memories of the Holocaust. I studied 125 Israeli scientists collaborating with German partners. My aim was to understand the relation between culture and science, but the Holocaust kept coming up. Today, I will mostly share with you voices of my interviewees in that respect, the Holocaust. To keep in mind that some of my scientists are leading scientists in the world. Those are the very best minds. Allow me to open with two contrasting quotes. The first testifies to the fact that some Israeli scientists still have difficulty collaborating with German colleagues. The second, to their challenges while doing so. And here's the first quote. I will never apply for a German foundation. This was one of my colleagues who told me when I was looking for interviewees. Another said, it is politically incorrect to say such things. What do you mean? I asked him. I don't know. There are things. For example, I have a colleague here at the university who openly says, I will never submit a research proposal to the German Israeli Foundation because I am Jewish and they are German. I have a trauma. A professor of social work reported an extreme experience, and I quote, I got on a train in Germany and two police officers came and arrested somebody. They interrogated someone or arrested someone with dogs for an hour and a half of the trip. I was standing with a suitcase at the door. It was Holocaust Memorial Day, and we are a bereaved family. I stood there in a panic attack by the door, and that was my first trip to Germany. Indeed, Israelis learn to be survivors during Holocaust memorial ceremonies and films. They are nowadays trained to become survivors by taking trips to concentration camps in Poland. I asked the psychologist if her family had a Holocaust history. Her answer was adamant, and I quote, I don't think it's relevant, not because I have or do not have family history, but because I think we grew up so embedded we are all Holocaust survivors. We are all second and third generation. And it doesn't matter if history is on grandmother's hand or on the grandmother's sister hand or on the mother's cousin hand or the neighbors. It does not matter. We are all survivors. Look, why don't I travel to the Black Forest? Why don't I take trips in Germany? I'm going to Berlin and I wanted to take my kids at some point to show them, but they didn't want to go either. Why? Because we are a generation, no matter where we come from, we are Holocaust survivors. Not in the sense that we were physically there, but we are all second generation. It doesn't matter. I was talking to a colleague who recently came back from Germany and Switzerland. Her comments leave little doubt that Israelis are taught to become survivors, or at least traumatized in some manner. The Holocaust is inscribed in our senses by education, not by grandmother. Here is the quote. Maybe it's my scratch or trauma. I will start by saying that in my family, there are no Holocaust shadows, but there are Holocaust shadows as being Israeli. Boots, sound of boots on the sidewalk bounce me when I'm there, and trains in Germany make me shiver. I mean, I can't help but think of it. Last week I was in Zurich and Basel, Switzerland, so I was blown away by the fact that their German is very different and very soft, and they didn't understand. I mean, I told them, you don't do this to me. You don't scare me as the Germans do. But I think about it all the time, and all the time driving, I think about those forests and how the Jews live there and how winter passes and it's very cold and wet right now and another winter and another winter. And this is a scratch of being an Israeli, end of quote. At times, scientists meeting with colleagues in Germany shock their sense of delight. They are suddenly reminded of the Holocaust. A neurobiologist said he was invited after reunification to a Max Planck Institute in East Germany. He was struck by his Nazi colleague. And I quote, "We had dinner and I sat with one of the Max Planck executives. At the time, they were still 65 or 70 years old. The one sitting next to me said, 'Listen, I was a Wehrmacht soldier during World War II. He said, I was in Yugoslavia and those who killed the Jews there were the Croats. We just kept the order.' And you know, he runs the Max Planck Institute. People like that, they have tremendous power and money." And then he continued, "And then we were in the Ukraine, and in Ukraine, as you know, the Ukrainians killed the Jews. We just maintained the order." So I said to him, "You know, sir, my parents are from Warsaw. And as far as I know, the Germans killed my entire family, except my father who fled to Israel before the war." So he went quiet like that. But you saw he still had that Nazi attitude, end of quote. Another scientist reported about his friendly encounter with his German partner. They had good time together. And then he had this to say, quote, "My partner was older than me and I didn't know him before. It was through someone who matched between us. I got there and he hosted me very nicely and we spent a whole week writing a research proposal together. Toward the end of the weekend, I told him, 'Listen, I have a rented car and I'm returning to Israel on Sunday, so I want to travel. Tell me where to go.' So he more or less said, 'Nuremberg, you must visit there. But Nuremberg is not what it used to be.' Now, when somebody says to me like that and I lifted my head, he saw me lifting my head and he said to me, 'Listen, Nuremberg is not, I served in Nuremberg as a soldier.' And I think to myself, well, look, the first time I come to Germany, the first time I write a research proposal with a German, I get a Nazi soldier on my head. Where did that come from?" An award-winning researcher was hosted at the Advanced Studies Center in Grunewald. His experience there requires little commentary. It's a long quote. "I was at the Advanced Studies Center in Grunewald, West Berlin, and there is no library there, so they bring you every book you want. They have an amazing team in the library. In a day or two, you get almost every book in the world. They are amazing. I thought, here I am in Berlin, I'll read some of this classic 19th century positivist historiography to get a taste of it. I ordered a book in German without looking at the dates, nothing, just the title. It was a biography of Alexander the Great. Well, within a couple of days, the book arrives. I take it to my room. You know, it's very nice, gemütlich. It's very cozy, such wide windows into Grunewald's forest with this special light of the north. It's a beauty of a place. I sit in the armchair, open the book, and what do I see? I see that the book was printed in Grunewald in 1942, autumn 1942, just when they decided on the final solution. Now, you know where he is, right? In Grunewald, a short distance from Villa Vanzi, where Eichmann and Heydrich decided on the final solution. Anyway, he continues. Okay, that in itself wasn't that pleasant anymore. So I see that the publisher has come up with some introduction to explain why it is worth reprinting this biography written 50 years ago, something like that. Why should the publisher print it? He was probably a civilized man, educated. So he writes in the introduction to the book that a new edition of this thing should be published because the classical Greeks and the Romans understood that life is a struggle for survival and that the strong must physically annihilate the weak, and that the German people should enlist in this whole mission now. And it's written in German, you know, Gothic letters. I love books, you know. I read this, 1942, I got sick for a few days, and I'm not new to Germany, but for a few days, I walked around in shock. It seemed as if everything is full of poison, venom. The trees, the leaves, the streets, the soil, everything was soaked in some kind of horrible poison, and I just wanted to go back to Israel. Actually, I just wanted to come back home. Let me finish with those notes. While writing my book, The Unruly Mind, An Invitation to Israeli Science, I was invited to Poland to give a talk at a conference on Israeli culture. I took the opportunity and reviewed the book to those in attendance. Among them was another Israeli lecturer. After my talk on the cultural trauma that Germany inflicts on Israeli scientists, I saw that she posted a Facebook post that she was sitting in my lecture shedding tears. I therefore asked her what had happened. Her answer deserves the quote. I am a second and third generation of Holocaust survivors. And when you detailed how the trauma is engraved in us, like the sound of trains and railways or boots, seeing the eagle in Germany, hearing the German language, even among those not directly related to Holocaust survivors, it brought tears in me. On the one hand, I was saddened that we are a nation living in the shadow of trauma. On the other hand, the thought struck me that I was not alone in those feelings, and that was a solace. In the end, it had an element of recognition and release. So thank you. Have no doubt, the shadow of the past hovers above Israeli scientific collaboration with German colleagues. The shadow of the trauma of the past produces a threatened experience, dull stomach pain, at times dreadful horror, what Freud called unheimlich, the unhomey, the uncanny. You feel anxious in your living room, a sense that a ghost ruins your bedtime pleasures. Israelis experienced the uncanny in Germany because the past of the Third Reich remains present. Some scientists even expressed guilt, saying that their scientific cooperation with German colleagues is part of a process of penance and forgiveness. They acknowledge that in this collaboration, German money is being paid for the blood of Jews that were exterminated in the Holocaust. The Germans buy our forgiveness, they say. An historian, for example, said, yes, it is thanks to Hitler. Because of Hitler, we have research. I always tell my students, it is thanks to Hitler that you can read this study. So thank him. A senior researcher concluded, it is very clear that my money is from the blood of the Jews. Without the Holocaust, we would not have done this research, and it was very difficult for me. And I did not tell my Israeli colleagues, this project was very difficult for me. Let me contextualize what you just heard me saying. One of the things that surprised me in the interviews I did with Israelis living in Berlin was the stubbornness and penetration of the Holocaust into their senses. I have therefore focused on the depth of the cultural trauma of the Holocaust amongst contemporary Israelis. When they see snow, they immediately imagine grandma on the death march. They hear a train and the image of the train station in Treblinka comes up. They see a German shepherd. They immediately hear dogs barking in a concentration camp. Yes, the Holocaust is embedded in our senses. We were trained to be victims. The result is, as Fania Oz-Salzberger wrote in her book, Israelis Berlin, there is something radioactive in the Israeli-German encounter. To my surprise, Israeli scientists are as traumatized as all Israelis are. During their visits to Germany, they also look suspiciously after Nazis. They too are reluctant to step on the Stolperstein, the small street memorial spread across Germany. They too are frightened at the sight of a uniformed police officer, and they are amazed when their host posts a picture of their father in an SS uniform in their living room. The Holocaust, indeed, is a living memory for Israelis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. There's a Q&A box on the bottom of your screen if you have questions, and we have a couple of questions. Gad and Ofer, if you want to take your mic off and your video, Ofer, so people can see you, that would be great. The first question we have is, To what extent has anti-Semitism become more public in the last few years, both in Europe and the United States? So I don't know who feels most comfortable answering that. Maybe you both can address it, but Gad, you're the sociologist, and Ofer, you're the historian. We're talking about anti-Semitism today.
Gadi, I'll let you answer that.
Okay, so yes, I keep connecting with my interviewees both in Israel and in Berlin, and at times I get reports that life in Germany for Israelis is becoming more difficult as time passes, and it's not related to the corona, obviously. It's related to the growth of Islam in Berlin, and just as in the US, there are more hate crimes against Jews in Germany. So for, just to give a broad answer, yes, the sense of growing anti-Semitism is there both in Germany and surely in the US, you all know.
Thank you. Thank you, Gad. The next question actually is specifically for Ofer, and the person asks, do any family photos taken at home have any elements showing support for the Nazi Party? Interesting.
It's a very good question, and we would assume that, of course, not, but actually there are photographs of, especially in 1933, 1934, especially of young kids who want to be part of the National Socialist youth movement. And therefore, and some of them were actually accepted to the youth movement, so we see photographs of them in the whole attire of the Hitler Youth and other ideological movements. But it's still rare, and it's a kind of it's a funny curiosity to see that. It's not. I wouldn't say that there is a movement of Jews for Hitler. That's not what we see. What we see is mostly people that do not understand, children especially, do not understand exactly what is going on, do not understand where things are going. No one knew where things are going and want to be part of it. We do see not people who do not support Nazism, but people who support other kinds of fascism. So Italian fascism was not, I wouldn't say it was popular among Jews, but there were Jews who, at least until 1933, supported it. And I have some photos of the fascist society in Berlin, which were taken in a Jewish apartment or Jewish family apartment because they were part of this society. Again, this is interesting, and in retrospect, strange. But I don't want to make the impression that there were lots of people who did that. Most of the German Jews, especially the middle-class German Jews, were either liberal, Democrats, or Zionists, or both, of course.
Thank you. Why are there presently so many Israelis living in Berlin, is the question.
Well, this is quite a myth. The number of Israelis is debated to be around 20,000, and this is a tiny figure compared to the number of Israelis living, say, in New York or LA or San Francisco, or even in Boston. So what the surprising thing is that Israelis returned to Germany, right? This is the center of the trauma, and it's as if some Israelis, for example, perceive those returning to Germany as basically traitors. Your grandmother said you can go everywhere you want, but not to Germany. Or you can marry anyone you want, but not a German partner. So there is a statement, there is a political statement in going to Berlin, but there is also a choice. Berlin provides a very unique atmosphere, very liberal, especially for gay people. And therefore many Israelis find that this unique European context of having a life and a new biography in Berlin is something suitable. And finally, I should say that there are Israelis who try to bring Jewish life back in Germany. They emphasize producing Jewish cultural products. They write Hebrew, they use the Hebrew language, they do art, and they forcefully try to reposition Jewish Israelis as central in German cultural life.
Thank you. Ofer, there's a question for you. Are there also home movies from the 1930s? If so, do they reveal anything different from the photographs in terms of relations with German neighbors and the like?
Yeah, great question. There are. I was surprised to find them, but they actually are. Not a lot, though. So it's very hard to make generalization and to see if they are just like photographs or not, because it's not a lot. I know of 3 or 4 that survived. There is a little bit more than that, but this is what I have seen. And the scene is pretty much the same, but usually it wasn't as normal to take, as people took photos all the time. It was more of a celebration to have a movie, or it was more rare. So so usually it's when something is special happens. We go and visit our grandparents in their village for the first time, or we see someone famous. My grandmother is meeting with Albert Einstein, stuff like that. So, but other than that, many things are very similar.
There's a lot of questions. So I'm going to take, I think, like 2 more, and as they came in, and I'm trying to get to them all. Is there a characteristic difference between those who stayed and those who left, and any difference between those coming to the United States and those going to Israel?
During the 1930s, you mean?
Yeah,
right?
I believe that. It wasn't qualified, but that's what it sounds like.
It's a little complicated question. First of all, most of the Jews left Germany between 1933 and 1938, 1939. And so about 80% of them left Germany at that time. Obviously, people who had more money, it was easier for them to leave earlier, but that was not the only criterion. There were many different considerations. Some people, their life was not as severely changed after Nazis came to power. If they, for example, if they were World War I veterans, they had a better, for a while, they had a better situation than other people who were in Berlin, were better off than people in other places, and so on and so forth. But by and large, it's very hard to have a profile of people who left versus people who stayed. Most of them just left.
Okay. Thank you. Professor Yair, how do you reconcile your research on traumatized Israeli scientists with scores of young post-Zionist Israelis migrating to Berlin and celebrating it as home?
Well, Israel is a democracy in a pluralistic context, so you have views spread all over. We need to understand that Germany became the central source for research funding for Israeli academia especially since the 1970s. So German money made a big difference in Israeli science. And even in 1965 and earlier, first relations began in 1957, Nazi scientists were still operating, and nonetheless, Israeli scientists had to collaborate with them. So there are a lot of guilt feelings embedded in those relations. And as I mentioned at the opening, some scientists, even young scientists today, are not willing to collaborate with German partners and will not submit research proposals to Germany.
Okay, I'm taking one more. That's it. For God. My sense is that, it's not me, it's the person asking the question, is that the Germans have a better sense of their history and the atrocities committed during the war than do the Japanese. Do you agree?
I think so. Memory in Germany is worked upon in the public sphere, especially. You see a lot of memorials at the center of Berlin. You've got those Stolperstein, the small stones of where Jews lived in front of every house that Jews owned. So the memory in Germany is worked, and there is formal recognition from the top, from the German government. There is an annual meeting between the two governments. There are joint conferences around the Holocaust. The memory is worked. I don't know of any similar effort in Japan, just I'm saying about German memory. But we should also acknowledge that underneath the formal recognition of the past, there is repression by extreme right-wing people trying to forget the past, so as to bring back the sense that Ofer was talking about, the Heimat, the sense that Germany is a home that we can be proud of, because the memory made Germans not very proud of their past. And so some right-wing movements try to make Heimat an important thing, and in that sense, they need to forget the past.
Thank you. Thank you, God. Thank you, Ofer. This was fascinating. I know we're limited on time, and there's a lot more questions. I'm sorry that I didn't get to all of them, but it was illuminating. And I can say to everyone, thank you for participating, and please look for information on our upcoming webinars. And thank you to Dan Schlesinger for being with us today and being so involved with us. And we're so grateful for all of our friends. Be well, everyone, and stay tuned for our next webinar. Thank you to you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.